Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post. Rogue colleges in chaos have no idea what to do. They're losing billions in grants and their tax-free statuses. Some of the grants have already been canceled or frozen at multiple colleges and universities. The Trump administration is going to war with higher education. This is the most aggressive, most chaotic, most destructive path they could possibly take to try to get the colleges and universities back under control and serving the American people. You have to keep in mind some 25 to over 50% of some of our elite institutions' students don't even come from the United States. And beyond that, these colleges and institutions are accepting funding from foreign governments like Qatar, like relationships with China, much of which who even knows what's actually going on over there. And with the diversity, equity, and inclusion problems, the discrimination, the destructive riots on campus, the intimidation of students, something has to be done. So the Trump administration is taking this thing up to 11. And over at Inside Higher Ed, they're trying to let colleges and universities know what's going on and how to think about Trump's strategy targeting colleges' grants and contracts. Even they admit the novel approach that Trump is taking is targeting billions of dollars for research and could reshape higher education for years to come. Because you can have all the lawsuits you want against the federal government and say, look, you promised us this research grant, you're not giving us that research grant, and this one goes through, and maybe that one doesn't go through, and this one gets reduced and it can get negotiated. But then there's going to be year 2, year 3, year 4. If they can't depend on the funds, then Harvard starts saying things like this. From the Gateway Pundit, Harvard researchers whine that Trump's funding freeze will force them to euthanize animals before they can torture them, which is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but yeah, Harvard was coming on and saying, look, we're going to have to euthanize these animals. We can't allow them to live if we don't get funding from the federal government for the research grants we wanted to do. But let's face it, the purpose of research grants with these animals is to use them for medical research in a way that isn't so great for the animals anyway. Over the course of just 13 weeks, President Donald Trump has made it clear that he will use billions of dollars in federal grants and contracts, primarily for research, as a lever to force colleges and universities to bow to his agenda and increase the representation of conservative ideology on their campuses. Because it's not like it's a 5%, 95% thing on these college campuses. For the most part, it's a 0% versus 100% with their really aggressive, progressive, liberal agenda. The cuts don't follow any typical investigative processes and sometimes lack clear explanations of legal justifications. And such an aggressive ad hoc strategy is one that many higher ed education lawyers, policy analysts, and administrators say could reshape post-secondary education for years to come. Quote, it's certainly unprecedented and deeply disturbing, said John King Jr., former Secretary of Education under President Obama and current Chancellor of the State University of New York system. Trump's actions, quote, really threaten the long-standing partnership between the federal government and higher education in the pursuit of both innovation and economic mobility. Get that economic mobility? The idea is that the federal government, through taxpayers, should be funding their ability to give jobs to only certain kinds of people through their DEI hiring standards and to focus the resources of the colleges and universities on the kinds of people that they want to give advantages to. This is the discriminatory stuff that really does have to stop, and the only way to stop these people is to get their attention and have them realize now, finally, and talk amongst themselves, as they're doing here in Inside Higher Ed, to say, okay, look, there is actually no way to stump this particular Trump. We can't stop him. Trump and his advisors have signaled their intent to crack down on woke higher education, but haven't said how they will do so. Instead, a cadre of conservative policy analysts plotted how to leverage other agencies and sources of funding beyond access to the $130 billion distributed annually in federal student loans and Pell Grants. This has nothing to do with federal student loans. This has nothing to do with grants that are going to students. This is all the other monies that the colleges count on to be able to pay their overhead and to fund research projects. But at Harvard, for example, they take up to 60% of even cancer research, or when they're doing things to animals, that kind of medical research. 60% of it can go to Harvard and to pay their overhead. 40% would go towards the actual research. For comparison, Bill Gates will pay up to 10% of a grant to allow that to be overhead. The Trump administration wants that number down to 15%, so that the money that the federal government actually gives these colleges actually does go to research projects not just paying for their ridiculous administrators and their extra expenses. Quote, at the beginning, it felt like I was the only one fighting, Chris Rufo, an influential anti-DEI advocate and member of the Board of Trustees at New College of Florida, said on The Daily, a New York Times podcast last week. Quote, now, fast forward 5 years, and some of the ideas that I had cobbled together have suddenly become reality. They've become policy. They affect billions of dollars in the flow of funds. Chris Rufo was also the guy that got Claudine Gay fired, basically. There were other people involved, but he was one of the key guys. But efforts to send colleges and universities into an existential terror, as Chris Rufo put it, have required the Trump administration to move at a dizzying pace and leverage multiple mechanisms that most higher education lawyers, policy analysts, and officials say are incredibly novel, which actually is a compliment. To catch up, here are 4 things you should know about Trump's funding threats to colleges and universities. A large part of what makes the Trump administration's current push to crack down on colleges and align their actions with his agenda so unprecedented, experts say, is its sheer magnitude, from the amount of money at risk to the number of investigations involving various agencies. The number of agencies the Trump administration has attacking colleges and universities is brilliant, because when you have HHS, the DOJ, and the Education Department, even just those 3 agencies taking on these colleges, there's no way to call some friend somewhere and say, you know what, at HHS, hey, could you do this for us, like behind the scenes, and fix this, and we'll do this for you and that for them. When you have 3 arrows independently pointing, targeting, going after, leveraging, and pressuring these individual organizations, there's nothing the colleges can do about it. Even if you know someone at the DOJ, you don't know anybody, or you don't know enough people at HHS or at the Education Department. And keep in mind, the Education Department is also being pulled apart brick by brick. It's an incredibly powerful, leveraged attack. The Education Department has historically taken the lead on holding colleges accountable, leveraging institutions' eligibility for student aid programs to force compliance. But this time around, it's an all-hands-on-deck effort with a magazine of federal programs used as ammunition. At least 4 departments beyond education, justice, defense, energy, and health and human services have also been involved, cutting off scientific research grants, which are typically considered immune from political attacks. And even if they were using 90% of the research money, which they're not going to do that, they want to use like 40%. Or maybe a little bit more, but usually it looks like it's a very low percentage number. Even if they were using 100% on the research, all of that money would be going to paying salaries that they try to keep retained and opportunities they keep retained. If you have staff, if you have overhead and expenses, and you don't have a flow of work for those people, it almost doesn't matter what percent you're trying to keep as an overhead profit. Because even if your goal was like, okay, we only want to make 10% for ourselves, it doesn't matter. You're not getting the money. So 100% of your expenses, you're getting stuck with unless you lay those people off. And even if you lay everyone off, you still have some other fixed obligations and expenses. These colleges are in some serious trouble. Unless they make the Trump administration happy, they're not getting out of this. The colleges can't plan. They can't staff up. They can't retain staff. Even if they try to retain the staff are going to look at it and say, well, I don't know, you're going to keep me now, but what if something happens with the funding next month? I'll go do something else. Very hard to keep people when things are so unstable like this. And that's another leverage tool that the administration is using against these colleges. James Nussbaum, who leads a higher education practice at an Indiana law firm, said that as Trump took office, he warned clients to be aware of any contracts they held with the Department of Education. But some of the cuts caught even him by surprise. Quote, people had their focus on one ball in the air and hadn't seen that these others might be affected, he said. To review federal funding for colleges that it believes have violated students' civil rights, the Trump administration launched a federal anti-Semitism task force that spans several agencies and has led some of the most public actions against colleges so far. What the Trump administration is doing enters a whole new territory, according to Princeton President Christopher Eisengruber. Starting with the freeze at Columbia, quote, the government was using its tremendous power over research dollars to try to control what a private university was doing in terms of matters that are generally considered part of academic freedom. There's a very fundamental threat here right now to American research universities that anybody who cares about the strength of this country, our economy, our prosperity, our security, our health, should be worried about. Sure, but maybe you guys could just go ahead and follow the civil rights laws and then you'd have no problem with your funding from the federal government. Is it that difficult? Yes, it is, because they're using their control of these universities and what they say that the economy and prosperity and national security are dependent on, to push their progressive ideas. They're saying if you don't let us push our progressive ideas and discriminate and break the law, then we're going to threaten your national security. I mean, that is what the guy essentially just said. Adding to the difficulty for colleges, the Trump administration is largely ignoring regulatory standards and procedures when it cuts funding. For instance, cabinet members have broadly used the term investigation to describe the ways they are cracking down on colleges. But in most cases, the review process has lasted only a few days and resulted in little to no evidence of the alleged violation. Often, universities have been presented with a list of ultimatums or policy changes they must make in order to avoid a funding freeze or restore their funds. Normally, the process was a college would be notified that there's a problem and they would spend months and months going through a detailed investigation. In the meantime, money would keep flowing. The college could pretty much ignore the investigation, maybe participate a little bit, and then everybody would kind of shake hands behind the scenes and maybe they would make a little adjustment, maybe they wouldn't, and then maybe a year later something could happen. No, that's not how they operate at the Trump administration. It's all now or it's never. Some universities have yet to even receive a formal notification about a funding freeze. For example, Brown officials have not yet received any official word of a rumored $500 million cut to their funding. Quote, we have nothing to actually substantiate what's being reported, according to Brian Clark, Brown's vice president for news, who told us to Inside Higher Ed. Brendan Cantwell, a higher education professor at Michigan State University, noted that despite the quick turnaround, the administration's investigations do at times parallel the motivations of traditional reviews. But what makes this approach so unprecedented and unlawful in his mind, he said, is its unmeasured and blanketed nature. So while there are precedents and similar examples in the past, beyond very superficial similarities, the similarities fall apart, he said. They are very deliberately throwing these colleges and universities into a complete chaotic panic, so they really just don't know what to do or how to respond. And so they can't operate normally the way they've been operating. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for change at the colleges and universities. First, the chaos has to begin. The same thing is happening with our trade policy right now, and it is messy, and it is chaotic. But it is how you get people's attention and let them know things are going to be changing, and they're going to change soon. And if you're not sure what to do, start thinking about what you could change that the administration would actually like. And really, that's what they're looking for at the White House. It's like when they say we've got this massive trade deficit with this country. What do they want from that country? They wanted to fix the trade deficit, figure out what we have in the United States that you guys could be buying more of so we'd have less of a trade deficit. They want the people in the chaotic state to figure out how can we resolve this situation? What can we bring to the table to offer to the White House? The means by which Trump is terminating grants and contracts is also novel, according to a lawyer who specializes in government contracts who told us to Inside Higher Ed. Generally, the only people who have authority to take contract-based actions on behalf of the United States are contracting officers or agreement officers, according to a law partner at Thompson Coburn LLP. But under the Trump administration, it's often unclear if this is the case, especially with the Department of Government Efficiency reviewing contracts and grants and touting decisions to cancel millions in agreements. A specific contracting officer is somebody designated by the government to act on behalf of the government in doing these deals with these colleges and these universities. Sure, that's how they normally do it. Why are they not doing it that way? Do you think that those people are career people? Do you think that those people are on board with making these changes that need to be made? Probably not. So that's why you don't need to go to those people if you're running this out of the White House, because the White House has a tremendous amount of authority. And you can imagine all those contracting officers probably have been well taken care of by their really close friends who they give contracts to and do deals with on behalf of the government. I'm not saying they're all corrupt, but I'm sure a couple of them might be corrupt. As a result of the sweeping scope of Trump's attacks and the lack of precedent, the risks for colleges and universities are more than financial higher ed experts say. Yet losing billions of dollars in federal funding is a problem, and not one that elite institutions and endowments can all solve. But more than that, what's at risk is its core mission and ethos of American higher education, according to King. Quote, from the technology inside your phone to the treatment you may receive at your doctor, all of that can be traced back to research conducted at America's higher ed institutions. And that's under threat, he said. And though the dollar amounts of funding pulled from smaller private liberal arts institutions and state universities may be more modest, they're still significant, he added. For those researchers, it's heartbreaking, and it will ultimately harm economic development and national security. If national security is at stake, could you just respect the civil rights laws? Maybe just that would be a good reason to come to the table and say, hey, look, we realize things went a little bit too far. tell us what to do to maintain our colleges, and we'll do that. Tell us that we're doing the right thing by the law, and we'll do that. None of them are actually doing that. Even Columbia University made a deal, and now it looks like they're trying to back out of that deal. The full impact of these funding freezes is not yet clear, but until the courts weigh in, colleges are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Quote, schools are trying to make that decision of how can we make decisions consistent with our mission and values in a way that's not going to get called out. They can run, they can hide, but they still have their hand out, and they want you to put billions of dollars of your tax money in that hand. That means they're going to have to figure out how to play ball with the administration, and if they can't figure it out, they're not going to get their money, they're going to lose their tax-exempt status, and they're going to be delegitimized. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.